Derek Marshall had always known the neighborhood's homeowners association was a ticking time bomb. What was meant to be a peaceful, suburban oasis had, over the years, mutated into something far worse. A playground for self-important retirees with a bloated sense of power. They strutted around like miniature bureaucrats wielding clipboards instead of gavels, handing out fines for trivial infractions, grass that grew half an inch too long, mailboxes that weren't painted the regulation shade of beige, or Christmas lights that dared to twinkle in colors deemed too festive. Most residents bit their tongues, played along, and paid their fines in the name of peace and quiet. Not Derek. He wasn't wired that way. And why should he be? His property wasn't even part of their HOA kingdom. He'd purchased his house long before the HOA had formed its own private government, complete with a kangaroo court. In legal terms, they had no power over him, and Derek had made that abundantly clear more than once. But clarity didn't seem to matter much to men like these. It was a Saturday morning when Derek heard the knock. Not a friendly tap-tap from a neighbor returning a borrowed tool. Not even the firm rap of a legitimate official. This knock had a rhythm. Slow, measured, deliberate. The kind of knock that comes from people convinced they're in charge. He glanced through the peephole. There they were. 3 middle-aged men standing shoulder to shoulder, khaki pants perfectly pressed, white polo shirts emblazoned with an HOA logo that was as fake as their badges. Slung over their chests were cheap nylon vests that screamed security in bold, white lettering. If you squinted, they almost looked legitimate. Almost. Derek didn't move. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of rushing to the door like some terrified peasant answering the king's summons. Instead, he took his time, leaning back in his couch and watching Diesel, his 200-pound pit bull, pace like a coiled spring, just waiting to be unleashed. Diesel wasn't barking, but Derek saw the signs. Ears pinned back, tail rigid, and a low, rumbling growl that vibrated deep in his chest. The dog sensed it too, trouble. When Derek finally rose, he strolled to the door and cracked it open, keeping the chain firmly in place. Just enough space to see their smug faces. "Can I help you?" Derek asked, his tone flat, unamused. The man in the center stepped forward. Judging by his puffed-up chest and practiced scowl, he fancied himself the leader. "Mr. Marshall," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "We need to discuss your fence. It's in violation of HOA guidelines. We've sent multiple notices." Derek sighed audibly, rolling his eyes without even trying to hide it. "I told you people already. I'm not in your HOA. My fence, my rules." The man smirked, tilting his head like a schoolteacher dealing with a wayward student. "We have the authority to enforce community standards. Either you comply, or we escalate." Derek's brow lifted. "Escalate? What are you going to do? Fine me?" The leader's expression darkened. "No," he said, his tone taking on a rehearsed gravitas. "We'll take action ourselves." That's when Derek's instinct screamed that something wasn't right. Most HOA zealots bluffed behind letters and empty threats. These guys, they stood too firm, too certain, and far too comfortable on his property. He shut the door, locked it. Then the bang came. In an instant, the door exploded inward. The cheap lock snapped like a dry twig, and before Derek could even process what had happened, they were inside. But what they found wasn't a frightened homeowner. It was Diesel. The giant pit bull launched like a missile, all muscle, teeth, and primal rage. What followed was chaos. Pure, unfiltered, and immediate. Diesel's roar wasn't just a bark. It was an ancient warning, one that bypassed thought and spoke directly to the reptilian brain. It said one thing: you've made the worst mistake of your life. The self-appointed leader was the first to feel the consequences. He stumbled back so fast his feet betrayed him, sending him sprawling to the floor. Gone was the smug face, replaced by raw terror. The second man froze, paralyzed by fear. Maybe he thought stillness would save him. Bad call. Diesel ignored him completely. He was already lunging for the third man, who had made the smartest decision of the morning, running. Too late. In 2 strides, Diesel was on him, slamming him into the ground outside with a bone-jarring thud. His scream, sharp and high-pitched, cut through the quiet morning like a siren. Derek strolled out onto his porch, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like it was a slow-motion car crash. "You were saying?" he asked the leader, who was now on his knees, khakis soaked from fear and shame. "Call him off. Call him off," the man squealed, his voice cracking. Derek leaned casually against the doorframe. "Now you want to negotiate?" The second man, who had been frozen in place, snapped back to life and bolted. No words, no dignity, just pure flight, arms flailing like a rag doll in a wind tunnel. Diesel, meanwhile, had the third man pinned. The poor idiot lay motionless, eyes fixed on the massive jaws inches from his throat. Derek let the silence drag. Let them stew in their bad decisions. Then, finally, he whistled. "Diesel, release." The pit bull gave one last guttural growl, a promise that this mercy was temporary, then stepped back, slow and deliberate. The man on the ground stayed exactly where he was, probably too afraid to believe he was still alive. The leader, still shaking, pointed a trembling finger. You'll regret this." Derek smirked. "I think you're already there." And just like that, they ran. Derek dusted off his hands and turned to Diesel, who wagged his tail as if he hadn't just given 3 men a story they'd never forget. Good boy. He thought it was over. The HOA thugs had been humiliated, Diesel had gotten his exercise, and Derek was ready to enjoy the rest of his weekend. Then came another knock. Not the self-righteous rap of the HOA. This one was measured, professional. When Derek opened the door, it wasn't khakis and clipboards. It was blue uniform and a badge. Officer Brian Cooper stood there, expression neutral but tired, like a man who'd already had enough nonsense for one morning. "Mr. Marshall," Cooper said, "mind if we talk?" Derek sighed and stepped aside. As the officer entered, Diesel watched him. Still, silent, measuring. To his credit, the cop didn't flinch. Smart guy. Experienced, too. "We got a report," Cooper began, "that you assaulted 3 HOA security officers." Derek blinked, then laughed. A genuine, head-thrown-back laugh. "Assaulted?" he repeated. "You mean the guys who kicked in my door?" Cooper's face twitched just slightly. "That's their story." Derek crossed his arms. "I didn't sick Diesel on them." He reacted to a home invasion, like any loyal dog would. As if on cue, Diesel yawned, slow, deep, and somehow still threatening. "Do you have footage?" Cooper asked. "Oh, buddy," Derek said, already pulling out his phone. "I've got footage that'd make Spielberg jealous." He showed the officer the 4K footage from his security system. Multiple angles, crystal-clear shots of the men breaking in. Cooper watched in silence, nodding slowly. "Yeah," Cooper muttered. "That's going to be a problem for them." 2 days later, Derek got a call. "Mr. Marshall," the voice on the line said, professional but with a grin behind it. "This is Officer Cooper. Thought you'd like to know. Those 3 are being charged with breaking and entering." Derek chuckled. "Oh, I like where this is going." Cooper sounded amused. "They tried to claim they had HOA authority to enter your home. And they didn't. Not even close," Cooper said. "Legally, they had the authority of a kid selling lemonade." Derek whistled. "So they broke in, got wrecked by my dog, and now they're crying about it?" "Oh, it gets better," Cooper replied. "The guy Diesel tackled? He's suing you for emotional distress." Derek's laughter shook the walls. Emotional distress? What's he claiming? That Diesel hurt his feelings. "Pretty much," Cooper said. "His lawyer says your dog is a lethal weapon." Derek snorted. If Diesel was a lethal weapon, that man wouldn't be filing lawsuits. He'd be 6 feet under. Cooper chuckled. "See you in court." Derek hung up, ruffled Diesel's ears, and grinned. "Looks like we got a show to put on, buddy." Diesel thumped his tail. "Justice. Served with teeth."